Welcome to this first episode as part of our pre-show talks for the International Concert Series here at Anvil Arts. In this first instalment, enjoy listening and learning more about the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. This talk is hosted by Doug Buist, and he is joined by Kati, Debretzeni and Katherine Spencer.
Good evening. My name's Doug. I'm the marketing director of the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, and I'm really delighted to be joined by Kati Debretzeni, who is one of our leaders and directing the orchestra this evening, and Katherine Spencer, who's our principal clarinetist. And everyone's been telling us all day we're the first thing since Panto. And it's nice to be getting back to normal. Well, we like Panto. Let's see where we are by half-time on that one. So the first bit of housekeeping, very quickly to do, and then I'm not going to talk a lot, is to say that, but it's relevant to our theme of our talk this evening, is that Katherine is universally known as Waffy. Apart from, there we go. And we decided we're going to explain that at the beginning, because otherwise we'll end up with a lot of us going, Katherine, Waffy, 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 Katherine. So we're just going to go with it. Do you want to explain it at all? No? Okay. Good. It's probably best. So that leads neatly into our, while you pick up your microphones, the first thing we want to talk about is this concert really is themed around the idea of friendship in music making on many levels, and sort of your friendship, the orchestra friendship, and of course amongst some of the composers. And maybe Kati or Waffy go first. It's a bit like Panto already.
He's behind you. Well, we started off on the drawing board with Mozart's Clarinet Concerto. And then we thought, now what do we put with that programme? And for me, the Mozart Clarinet Concerto is about friendship, because of course, without his friendship, Mozart's friendship with Anton Stadler, there probably wouldn't have been, well, there might have been a concerto. No, actually, there wouldn't have been, I don't think. Certainly not like this. And we're going to come on to how it turned into a whole different thing in a moment through their friendship. Actually, their friendship was a rather odd one. Whilst they were great pals and would often go off drinking together, in fact, Mrs. Mozart was not so keen on their friendship. And she used to think that when they'd go on tour, that they were a bit sort of lager-louts on tour. But it did produce this wonderful piece. And then we sort of looked really at how you could find connections, friendships, connections with other people, all stemming from that piece, and that's how we sort of ended up with all the other pieces in the programme. So is that enough of an overview?
It is, yes, I think so. But we mostly know who Mozart is, although we shouldn't assume. You can probably guess, so it's Michael Haydn. You can probably guess one of his relations. But actually, we're interested in his relationship with Mozart, and I wonder, Kati, whether you might very quickly tell us a little bit about Michael Haydn.
I think that's also a wonderful tale of friendship, because Michael Haydn, brother of, had lived in Salzburg and was a very good friend of Mozart, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also frequented some of the pubs in Salzburg together. And we know that because Michael Haydn had been commissioned to produce, for example, 6 duets for violin and viola. And he produced 4 because of the time spent in the pub, and then the other 2 were late. And the deadline was looming. And in the pub one evening, he said to his friend, Wolfedel, Wolfie, could you help me out here? And could you possibly write me 2 other duets? Because the deadline is the day after tomorrow, and I don't know what to do. And Mozart said, yes, of course, and produced the most wonderful 2 duets for violin and viola, the G major one and the B flat major one, which are absolute masterpieces. And they got published as number 4 and number 5 and 6 of Michael Haydn's 6 duets for violin and viola. And nobody minded, least of all Mozart. So that is a tale of a good friendship. I think that's another friendship, and they were both fond of writing divertimenti, which are basically suites of little movements, lots of minuets. The dances that are there are just minuets, and then different types of movements, little allegros, little polacas, polonaises, the type of movements that the Baroque composers also used to use in their suites. And they were really for entertainment. And people might be commissioning one, so it might be for a little serenade to someone's window, or it might be for background music at a palace, or it might be for music around a table. And they both wrote quite a few divertimenti, and one of them, the Michael Haydn divertimento that we're playing tonight, is a very good example of that kind of writing, which they also shared.
Yeah, and there's a nice story about sort of eine kleine Nachtmusik, a little night music. Is actually rarely actually for this period. That is the title that Mozart gave it, because he wrote in his catalogue, it was a little bit of night music, basically, didn't he? And that is how we know it. And I think it's somewhat underrated, but we'll come back to a little night music. So, Wafi, you've talked about the fact that Mozart and Stadler, and there was the third, I can't remember whether you mentioned Lotz or not, but you can tell us about him. They were friends. That led to an instrument. But friendships of yours also led to our sort of fourth guest on the stage this evening, which is Grace here. So could you tell us a bit about how that came about?
Yeah. So when Mozart started writing the concerto, we've got 199 bars of manuscript, and that's all we have of the original. And he started off writing it for basset horn in G. And then after about 72 bars, he changes to basset clarinet in A. Now, up until this point, this instrument didn't exist, but Anton loved low notes. In the court wind band, where he was a member, he played second clarinet to his brother. And I think it's probably because he loved the low notes, so why wouldn't he play the second clarinet part? And he got together with his friend Mozart, and also their great friend, who was also a bassoon player, but he made instruments. And together, they concocted the idea that they would invent this new instrument together, which would go lower than a normal clarinet. And Mozart would write a concerto for it. So he sort of swapped this concerto he'd started writing for this instrument. And then it got born. But there weren't, this wasn't a one-off. It was a unique thing. And so therefore the concerto was a unique thing. And so actually after Mozart's death, the piece got published by 3 different publishing houses in the same year, in, I think, 1802. And, of course, they thought to themselves, well, it's a great piece, but if we write it for this instrument that no one's got, it's not going to make us much money. So they decided to publish it for A clarinet, for normal clarinet. So we didn't really look into it being for a different instrument till about the 1970s, well, actually 1950s, when it kind of came to light that there was a review from the time of about 1802 of a newspaper, the Allgemeinische Zeitung, I can't quite remember the name, and in this review, it was clear that the gentleman writing the review had both the manuscript, the original manuscript of Mozart in one hand, and the new published version for the clarinet in the other hand. And he keeps sort of saying, what a shame that the publishers didn't give us the proper music, because have a look at this bit here, and it goes down to these low notes. But in the this clarinet version, it goes to high notes here. So it was by actually finding this article that we could then go, oh, that's actually Mozart. And then when you look at those little bits and then you think, well, if he did that there, he probably did that there. And then you end up with us being able to reconstruct the piece for the instrument it was written for. And I'm probably going on a bit long here, because it is a quite long story, isn't it? But when I came to be playing it myself, I was like, doing this concert tonight is a dream come true for me. Because the only orchestra I ever wanted to play in, I hope there's nobody from any of my other orchestras, was the OAE. I saw them on stage when I was a student. Actually, they came to a youth orchestra I was in and played, and I was just like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be with them. So to be actually playing this piece with them tonight is, it's very special. So when I got asked to play this piece, I was like, well, I better get an instrument then, because I don't have one. So I thought, well, there's been quite a lot of research into making, because there are no surviving instruments from the time, because obviously it wasn't a very popular instrument, and so there are none you can go to a museum and say, well, in Munich they've got this one, so we could do it like that, and in Paris they've got this. No, there's nothing out there, apart from this one little etching, sort of grainy etching, from a programme from when Stadler took the piece on tour around Europe after Mozart's death. Actually, maybe during, a little bit before he died. And so there has been a lot of research done into this etching, and there's been some wonderful copies made as true as possible to that tiny little picture. And some of those instruments are really beautiful. But I thought, well, you know what? That's been done. And for me, again, this concert, I wanted to come back to the essence of it for me and why we came up with this whole programme, friendship. And so I thought, okay, I want to make that the basis for why I'm designing the instrument the way I am. So I thought to myself, well, the very first instrument that I used when I came into OEE a long time ago, and also Tony Pay, who had my position before me, we went to the great maker and pioneer, actually, of clarinets, Daniel Bangham, and he made us our very first instruments, and I've always loved them. And his instruments, the first instrument I had from Daniel Bangham was a French instrument. And so I thought, well, I know it's not meant to be a French instrument, it's not meant to have a French bore, but I said, well, that's the first thing I want, because I loved that, and I loved that about your first instrument you made for me, so I want a French bore, I want it to be like a Simeo. I don't want it to be anything like a Grenzer. So we'd gone off-piste already. And then there were all sorts of other considerations, and then there was, you had lots, Mozart and Theodore, and Anton, and I had myself, Daniel, and then his student, who is not really a student anymore, Guy Cowley. And we've known each other since we were about 14. I think we went to the pub together.
You were the Mozart and Stadler of your day. Yeah.
Yes. And so I sort of commissioned him to make it, because he knows me really well. He knows what I want from an instrument. He knows that I want the keys to feel a certain way. He knows that how I want the instrument to speak and to sing. And so he just went off, and we had a conversation in summer 2024. And then off he went, and he created Grace. And he was quite nervous on the day I went to pick her up, because some makers, they like the instrument to be sort of, pretty much there, but they want to do that sort of perfecting with the player. But Guy's not like that. He wants you to come and it to be perfect. And so, when I walked in, his wife said, "You do realise he's really nervous about this because he wants it to be perfect." So I was like, "Oh, I hope it is." Felt the pressure. Anyway, he showed me the instrument. And it was like when you see your child for the first time, this name just popped into my head. I was like, she's Grace. Because she just looked like an angel. And she's been Grace ever since. And actually, she was perfect. And we did very, very little to change her.
That's such a wonderful story. I think we could probably all just go now. And that's enough story. We'll get you to show us, tell us about some of the differences in a minute. And I know you're not keen to put the read on for too long. So do you want us to talk about something else for a minute while you put a read?
We're going to hear the clarinet in the show.
Yeah.
Maybe we just hear the clarinet in the show.
Yeah,
Yeah, I reckon that's okay, isn't it?
Fair enough. It's good.
Strike.
Could you, in which case, just quickly, what is the main difference between Grace, the basset clarinet, and a clarinet?
She's obviously longer. So you can see at the back here, there are notes which you have to play with your thumb. On a normal clarinet, you don't have these thumb notes. So because I'm playing with my thumb, I have to have another way of holding the instrument, because you can't have a thumb rest or whatever, and you need to take your thumb off to play the notes. So Daniel designed this little bit of pigskin here, which I thought was amazing. And then I hold the instrument with that, and then I can play the notes with my thumb. And those notes that you play with your thumb are the low notes. So when you see me doing all sorts of funny tricks on stage, that's because I'm trying to find one of those low notes. And that's basically it. But because it is that longer bore, but still the same width all the way down, it does change the sound, and it makes it slightly more silvery and a little bit covered. So it is a different. It doesn't have that brightness of the A clarinet, because it's just the vibrations have got to go much further. They've got to travel much further.
And I think even if you don't know the clarinet concerto inside out, I found just in rehearsals, listening to it, you feel things are different, and there are lots of lovely surprises that we don't want to give away, I think, do we? So we're just going to leave you to listen to it and enjoy it. But one thing that will be obvious quite quickly when you get on stage is there's no conductor. And a lot of you will be used to us turning up and going, haha, there's no conductor. But for those that haven't sort of come across that, it's not a big orchestra, but it's still, and there's quite a lot of distance covered on stage. So how is it working without a conductor? You know, how are you keeping them under control, Kati?
It's really easy. We do it together. That's it. There's nothing else. It's playing without a conductor, especially in a smaller band. It just means that we're making extended chamber music. I mean, a string quartet doesn't have a conductor, and the Mendelssohn octet also doesn't have a conductor. So, and if you have a little Strauss Metamorphosen, then you can also do that without the conductor. So you can do basically, any this type of orchestra definitely doesn't need a conductor. The conductor was not there in the era that we're playing the music from. If there was anyone, there was a keyboard player. Maybe Mozart himself would have been at the keyboard, and maybe he would have given 3/4 at the beginning, and then off everybody went, and everybody listened to each other. And because it's small enough, it's easy to listen to each other and to make extended chamber music. So it means that the investment of every single member of the orchestra has to be bigger than when you are with a conductor. When there's someone in front of you providing energy, then you as a player are a reflector somehow. Would you say? Okay. You're a reflector of that energy, and you feed off that energy, and your energy comes as a response to something that you see. So imagine that being taken away. You still have to have the energy, but you have to generate it in a different way. So it has to be generated from the floor up, rather than from the top down. And that's a very I think for us as an orchestra, it's a very rewarding occupation when we do that, because then everybody feels invested, and everybody feels equally responsible for the outcome, because there's no one there providing it. There's more discussion, There's more probably in a conducted performance, you can probably be spontaneous in a different way because it takes a fraction of a second for everyone to react to an impetus. And of course, you know, the leader can give an impetus. I can be, for example, responsible for timing. So if I want to, you'll hear in Eine kleine Nachtmusik, we treated it as a little bit more free than what is normally done. So we take a little bit of time between one thing and another. And how much time that is, that's my responsibility to show, but then it's everybody's responsibility to take the energy together to do it. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Brilliant.
Can I just add in one thing in response to what you're saying, with this energy coming up, I agree with, but also when the conductor's there, they're facing us, not you, but we're facing you. So we can look at you and take your energy too, and that does shape how we play more when we don't have a conductor.
That's very true. That's very true. And that was very evident when we did concerts for empty halls in COVID. That was really, really evident. That whatever we did a prom, I remember, for an empty Royal Albert Hall, I think it was televised, with Alina Ibrahimova and Nikki Benedetti, and then Alina's father died and she couldn't be there. But and that was, it was really evident. There was no conductor, it was just us, and there was no one to feed off. So your energy was not there, and that was really, really, really missing. There was a big, huge void, because you do provide the energy that we feed off. That's true.
So we're doing a great job here, and we've nearly introduced everybody, including the audience, involved in the concert tonight, which is great. There's one other character, and I think you might be the person to tell us about this, which is one Arriaga, that's the short version, who wouldn't have known Mozart, but does have a connection.
Well, he has a connection in as much as being a child prodigy who was extremely quick to rise, a meteoric rise, and then a very shortcut life, even shorter than Mozart. In fact, Mozart was 35 when he died. Arriaga didn't make it to 20. He did have a very long name as opposed to the short life. I think he was called Juan Cristosomo, Jacobo Antonio de Arriaga e Bellasosa. That's it. So so his name was a little bit longer than his life. He was born and bred in Bilbao, and I think he still is the Basque claim to fame in classical music of previous eras. He's the composer. I think Spain also claims him as, you know, as something as their own. And he was a child prodigy on the violin, on keyboard, and in composition. So the overture that we're going to play, he was born in 1806, and the overture was written in 1818. So I'll leave you to do the maths of how old he was when he wrote it. And very quickly he was sent. His father educated him, and his father must have been a possible musician. He was a businessman, because he realized what he had on his hands, and he sent him off to Paris, to the best conservatoire in the world at that point, the Paris Conservatoire, which was just founded around the turn of the 19th century. And Arriaga gets to study with Bayot, the violin, who's the master at that point. Studies composition with the Fétis, and so he gets the best of the best of the best possible musical nurture in Europe, which is a very important. The musical language is at the crossroads at that point, because it's just turning. You imagine 1806 when he's born. You know, Beethoven has written already his first, second, and third symphony. So, and the French Revolution had reverberated and all that, and concert halls have become for everyone, and not only for the nobility and for the church. So it's when classicism turns into Romanticism. So he's there to witness it, and then it's cut short, and he leaves us a few string quartets and an opera that's lost, and an overture and a symphony, and that's it. So it's a real shame, and who knows what could have been. If Mozart lived to 70, who knows what could have been, and if Arriaga lived to at least 40, what could have been, we don't know. But we really enjoyed engaging with the work of a 12-year-old.
Brilliant, thank you. So, because obviously Wafi and Kati are performing, we're going to need to whisk them off fairly quickly. I don't think we've got a roving mic, but I think we might have time for one or two quick questions. If anyone has a burning question they want to ask, don't have to.
Yeah, I think I have one actually.
Yes.
Just the history of the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment would be great.
The Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment was founded in, it's our 40th anniversary season at the moment. It was founded in 1986 by a couple of, well, more than a couple actually, about 5 or 6 like-minded musicians who were at that point working for period instrument orchestras, which all had one music director. So there was the Academy of Ancient Music with Christopher Hogwood, there was the English Concert with Trevor Pinnock, there was the English Baroque Soloist with John Eliot Gardiner, and there was the Gabrieli. Actually, the Gabrielis I don't think were founded then. I think that came a little bit later. And of course on the continent, there was La Petite Bande with Sigisfeld Kauken and the Orchestra of the 18th century with Franz Bruggen. So, and each orchestra was one person's, usually man's, band. There were no, at this point there were no women directors. And these people thought, hang on, we would like to do something a little bit different. We would like an orchestra which doesn't just have one music director. We would like to be the master of our own destiny, and invite whoever we'd like to work with us, so that we don't just have one musical language which we feed off. We have many inspirations. And this is how the orchestra was born. It very quickly got a very good status, especially when the then quite young Simon Rattle decided that this orchestra is the one that he would like to do a Mozart opera with at Glyndebourne. And then the Glyndebourne partnership started, and we're still there at Glyndebourne, and we have a number of music directors, which you can see in the program. And we work with, hopefully, the most inspiring musicians that we can think of in Europe and wider. So that's the story of the orchestra.
And that's going to give me a good segue into the last few bits of information. If you go on our website, if you go to the Discover section of our website, there's a really lovely blog written by Jan Schlapp, who was, I think, one of the founding members, was right there at the beginning. Her husband was one of the key movers, and she's written a really lovely blog about how it started, and it's a great story. So thank you for asking that question. If you would like to, if you go on our Instagram, possibly Facebook or YouTube, and after the concert, and you want to know more about the Basset clarinet and Grace, Wafi's done a few videos on there which are really entertaining, really informative, and there's also a lovely video of the slow movement of the Mozart clarinet quintet played on Grace, which is gorgeous, with Kati as well. Wafi, is there anything else you would like to say before we sort of get out of Dodge? No. Brilliant. So we will see you again in February. We're coming back. You're really lucky, actually, because we're doing these sort of 2 Mozart concerts quite close together, this one, and then the last 3 symphonies, 39, 40 and 41, he probably didn't know at the time. But we're doing a concert of them all together with Robin Ticciati, and you're getting both parts. And I think you're the only other place apart from the South Bank Centre where we're doing that. So I'm sure we'll look forward to doing that. I think it's the 25th of February. You've probably all got tickets because you're the people who get in early. So as always, it's a pleasure to come here. Thank you for coming out and supporting us and supporting live music and orchestras generally. Do enjoy the concert. Thank you very much. Thank you.